Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of EOXS's Stories on Steel. This is a steel industry podcast featuring the big names of the business and the advice/stories they've accrued over their years as insiders. Steel has been a vital component in American life for well over a century, and the men and women who've helped it flourish are a diverse group of innovators full of interesting tales. We hope to share some of said tales here with you today. Special thanks to EOXS for providing this platform. In addition to this show, they are bringing businesses online by providing a standardized digital workspace for all your steel-related needs. Today, we're happy to welcome the sales manager at the Mill Steel Company, Mr. Bob Kula. Bob, thank you so much for giving us the time today. How you doing?
Good, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we were getting into it a little bit before the start of the episode, but how are things currently going in Texas and Houston, where you're coming to us from?
Well, weather-wise, it's beautiful down here. It's in the high 70s. As far as the economy goes, the steel business has been in a 7-8 month cycle where it's extremely tight. There's a shortage of steel, and like a lot of building products, lumber, concrete, sheetrock, the price of steel has almost doubled since last August. And that's the state of affairs right now. It's very difficult to get steel, and steel's at its historical all-time highs right now.
I know that we're going to get more into you in the wider story of the company, your story, and how you got into the steel industry. But while we're on this topic, the global demand for steel is staggering currently. Was this something like widely anticipated by the market and the industry professionals?
No, well, if you go back to a year ago, when obviously the COVID virus kind of blanketed the entire world, I think in the steel industry, everybody thought we were going to go into a deep, dark recession. And so they started shutting down steelmaking capacity, trying to prepare for it. And quite the opposite just happened. In building products, which I'm the sales manager for Mill Steel, demand did not even fall off. In fact, it increased. And our demand from 2020 over 2019 was up 24% for building products. Now, automotive, they shut down for 100 days. A lot of manufacturing did because of COVID reasons. Obviously, the spread of the virus inside assembly plants, they had to do that. But as far as construction products went, it never lost any pace. In fact, it picked up pace. It was up 24% for us over 2019. And then when basically automotive, appliance, they all started coming back and started manufacturing, the demand for steel just took off. And so what happened is they shut down so much capacity, and then coupled with building products, which was on fire, and then the startup of automotive, appliance, and every other manufacturing you can think of, there started becoming a shortage in August of last year, and ever since then it's gotten worse. In my 30 years of being in the steel industry, this is the tightest market I've ever seen, where you can't find steel. You can, but it's limited, and prices are moving up every week. So
Has re-entering that level of production, like revving back into full capacity, been a challenge, or have you guys just immediately been like right on it?
well, again, we are a service center distributor, so we do not manufacture steel. We buy it from the mills. As obviously being from Buffalo,
Yeah.
you had the old Bethlehem Steel up there, which was then ISG, which and I think it now is ArcelorMittal. You got facilities in Lackawanna. You got Burns Harbor, and did I say that right, Lackawanna?
Yeah, no, I was just there the other day. It was funny.
Oh, is
it's,
that
it's
right?
it's one of those towns you don't ever expect anybody outside of Buffalo to know. So
Yeah.
it was kind of fun to hear.
So, I mean, the steel making capacity in the United States, you got most of it, 65% of it's in the Indiana harbor between Chicago and Gary, Indiana. When you shut down steel making capacity, you can't just turn it back on like a water faucet. I mean, you have blast furnaces you have to heat back up and reline. And so I think right now we're running at, as a country, we're probably running at 75% capacity. If we run at 100% capacity, we're still probably, I want to say 40 million tons short. So we need imports. So if you can do the math real quick, based on running at 75% capacity with very little imports right now, because I think the rest of the world did the same thing we did. They shut down a lot of steel making capacity when COVID started. You got a recipe for prices doubling in about 9 months, and that's where we're at.
Do you think there's any kind of distinct timeline for when we get back to 100% capacity if we were right now at 75, like you were
Well,
discussing?
I think the closest that we've ever gotten is maybe 90 or 92% capacity. And when they measure capacity in the steel business, it's all about melt. So you have two types of mills, and I don't know if you're familiar with them. You have the integrated steel mills, which have the old, the coke ovens and blast furnaces where you're actually melting steel, and then you have the new technology like Nucor and Steel Dynamics. That's the mini mills, which is all electric arc furnaces, and all they're doing is melting scrap. And so when they measure capacity, they measure the melt in the United States or even around the world for that matter. So, um, you know, once, and the other thing that I need to mention, the reason things are so tight is, 3 years ago, President Trump enforced 232 tariffs on imports.
Yeah.
So anything coming into the country had a 25% tariff or 50%, I think, on aluminum, or maybe it was 15% on aluminum. I can't remember, but I know it was 25% on steel. So therefore, imports were not as attractive because of the pricing, and therefore, when you're relying on all of your steel making domestically and a very little imports coming in, you have the same recipe which you have now, which is high prices and very limited supply.
I think that general state of affairs is really interesting. So we're going to get back to it definitely, but I would love to briefly talk about you for a second, just because
Sure.
people want to know more about Bob Kula. How did
Okay.
you talked about your 30-year career in
Yeah.
the steel industry. Where did that begin?
Well, it's kind of funny. I was fortunate enough to play football and get my college degree at Michigan State University back in the 80s.
What'd you play?
I was an offensive lineman.
Of course.
And so I was fortunate, and I didn't think I was going to have to work a day in my life. I figured I was going to play 10 to 12 years in the NFL. I was fortunate to get drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in 1990. I got out there and found out the NFL stood for not for long. And so ended up actually getting cut my first year with Seattle. And then the very following spring, they started a league called the World League of American Football. I don't know how old you are, Kevin, but this was back in 1991.
I've heard stories. That is before I was born, though. So
Yeah. So I signed a contract with the World League of American Football, and I played for the franchise up in Montreal. It was called the Montreal Machine. So after that, I had a contract offer with the Pittsburgh Steelers, believe it or not. So I
ironic.
was very well with the Steelers. I pinched a nerve in my neck, and they ended up cutting me. And that's when I said, you know what? That was 2 tries already. I need to go get a real job. So I went back to Michigan State, went to the football program, asked them if anybody was hiring. I was fortunate to have my college degree, and they gave me somebody's number and said, call them. They're hiring steel service center trainees, and that's so I went to interview with Fairloy Corporation down in Detroit because that's where I was from.
Real quick, how old were you at this point?
24 years old.
24 years. 3 different, like, NFL, World League of Football, back to the NFL, all
Yep.
before you're 25. That is
Yeah.
quite a life, Bob.
So I was fortunate to get my very first job with Fairloy Corporation. They're service center headquartered out of Chicago. They had just bought a facility in Detroit, and they had multiple locations all over the country in Cleveland, South Carolina, California. And that's where I started my career as a sales trainee. And at that point in 1991, I spent 2 years in operations and got real familiar with steel service center work. And that's where it all started.
So how, obviously that kind of career change can be a bit jarring. Were there any growing pains with that new position, or did you take to it pretty well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you have to eat some humble pie, going from living in the NFL to going to work for a living. And in hindsight, it's the best thing ever happened.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I wasn't one of these guys that played 5 or 6 or 7 years and then had to go find a career in their late 20s. I was able to jump right into a career, thank God, goodness, and learn it. And it's a worldwide career. And I look back and I was very fortunate.
Now, I think speaking as a college graduate, a lot of people's first jobs out of college, they're not sure if they're going to stick with them long term. What was it about the steel industry that made you realize this is something that could be a career?
Well, it's funny. Growing up in Detroit, I was around steel my whole life with automotive, and I didn't really know what it was. I mean, you see all these trucks carrying steel coils down the road, but you never really knew. I never really knew what it was until I got in, started working for Fairlane, and going, "Oh, that was steel." So it just it was one of those industries. I took a liking to it and started asking a lot of questions. And of course, this was pre-internet, so everything I had to learn was through a textbook or asking questions, and that's I just enjoyed it from day one. There was no doubt about it that I was going to stay in it, and I moved all over the country for it, and it's been a great career. It really has. So,
Now, at what point did you land in Texas? Like,
so I started with Fairloy in Detroit, and after 2 years of production, I was getting really antsy. I wanted to get into sales, and they told me originally it was probably I'd be in the plant maybe 3 or 4 months. Well, 2 years later, there still was no position for me in Detroit. So I transferred to Chicago for Fairway in Chicago, and I became an inside salesperson there, and then eventually an outside salesperson, and then as I got to know what I was doing and made some connections, I got picked off by another company for more money, and that kind of started my moving around the rest of the country. And I went to work for a company out of Chicago that was running into some financial trouble. I left there and went to work for another company, and then actually got to work for National Steel, one of the mills.
oh,
30
really?
years ago, yeah, 30 years ago, National Steel was one of the many. I think there was like 34 mills in the country at that point. It was one of the still existing integrated steel mills, which is now owned by U.S. Steel. So I went to work for them in the late 90s, and got transferred down to Dallas, Texas back in 2000. So I've been down here in Texas over 21 years. So, and
Are
then
you
eventually from Dallas, I got moved down to Houston because that's where our district sales office was. So
all right? Now, real quick, what did you end up getting your college degree from Michigan in?
it was economics and management.
Okay, so did you find that that degree that you felt at some point was superfluous to your NFL career, like that's the big goal. Did you end up drawing on skills that you didn't ever expect to draw on in sales?
Absolutely. I mean, you talk about an economic industry that is, you talk about all the factors, interest rates, supply, demand. The steel business is 100. It checks all the boxes, and when I got into it, that's what was so intriguing. Uh, my desire to learn more and want to be a part of it. It was a natural fit, and I never even considered ever getting out of it. I've worked for several companies within the steel industry, but I never left it. And so it's been a good industry. It's not glamorous like financial or the tech industry. So a lot of people coming out of college don't think, oh, I'm going to go into steel business, but there's a lot of good jobs and a lot of good people in it.
I feel like there's some sort of poetry in the idea of a NFL offensive lineman with an economics degree going into selling a tough material like steel. I feel like there's some sort of like there's
Yeah,
there's
you're
there's
right. It
a
kind of
there's a
it
there's a
makes sense.
rhythm to that. There's a poetry to that.
Yeah, you know what? And it's when I got in the steel business, everybody will tell you it's a man's industry. It's a male dominated industry, and boy, they were absolutely 100% true about that. There's very few women now. As I've gotten older, there's more and more women that are in the industry. In fact, mill steel, I mean, there are a tremendous amount of females that are working mill steel on the sales side and even production and quality side. So it's an evolving industry. It's not so archaic and all male dominated like it was 30 years ago.
So when you've decided that this is going to this is the career for you, you've
Mhm.
moved around the country for different companies, found that your appreciation and love of the industry is not dimming as the years go on. Um, Tell me a little bit about Mill Steel Company, how you linked up with them and your current
Sure.
role with them.
So I mentioned to you I moved down to Texas for National Steel. Well, National Steel went bankrupt, like a lot of mills did because of legacy costs. U.S. Steel purchased them, and I knew this was coming, so I got out of Mill Steel, or not Mill Steel, but National Steel back probably 30 days before they filed bankruptcy in 2002. So I went to work for a service center in Chicago, but I stayed in Houston selling for that service center. Well, one thing led to another, and a buddy I kept in close contact with that worked at National Steel decided to start a company, and he asked somebody else to finance him. Well, we started that company. The guy passed away. Long story short, we took his money, and his wife, his widow, became a partner of my buddies. And for 14 years, we took a company from virtually nothing to about 135 million. And you know, things have a tendency to change. People change when they get money, and me and my buddies started seeing didn't see eye to eye for quite 3 or 4 years, and so I decided for make a change, and that's when I went to go work for Mill Steel. And being from Michigan, it was a natural fit. They had just bought a facility down here in Houston back in 2017, and I came on board with them. It'll be 2 years in May of 2019. So Mill Steel is a almost $1 billion a year company. It has three business units. One of the business unit I'm a sales manager for is building products. They also are big in automotive, obviously being in Michigan, appliance, and that's what they refer to as a repeat business because it's a lot of contractual business for any steel flat roll product. And then we also have a steel framing division that produces steel studs for commercial and residential housing. So
So it sounds like you have to be at least competently aware of a lot of different facets of the company. What was it like being informed of those different divisions and so forth, and being able to talk about them?
well, again, by the time I came to work for Mill Steel, I mean, I was pushing 29 years in the industry. Uh, there hadn't been too many markets I hadn't worked in, whether it was automotive, I knew of appliance, I understood tin, and I got an experience that a lot of people don't get to see. A lot of people that have come to work for me over the last 20 years, they've only worked in building products, so they only know one market. I was fortunate to have started up in Detroit, then moved to Chicago, uh, sold steel in Ohio, Western PA, and so I had a lot of experience with steel, and so and I was always a historian, so I always knew more about my competitors than they probably knew about themselves. So any person that I was selling against, I always looked at the history of it. And Mill Steel started in Western Michigan in Grand Rapids, supplying automotive and office furniture, which was big at the time. Back in this is the late 50s, and then early 2000s they started acquiring facilities. In fact, the Faralloy facility I worked at in Detroit, they purchased in 2001, and so when I came to interview with Mill Steel, it just felt like I was coming back home, even though I was staying in Texas.
Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
By the way, anyone that can point out Lackawanna on a map or even recognize where it is, I assume they basically know everything about the universe. Like I could ask you about how stars are born, and you could probably tell me spin a pretty good yarn about that. So obviously, it sounds like you entered this company, nearly $1 billion a year
Yep.
industry.
Hmm.
What year did you join up with them?
2019. So 2 years ago, this May will be 2 years that I came to work for Mill Steel.
So you entered the company obviously with a probably set series of visions of how the next 5 years are going to go, and I doubt I'm speaking out of turn when I say you were probably surprised by the events of the very next year, 2020, a lot of rapid succession chaos And it's never going to be a tired question because every company kind of has their own answer to it. But how did like what was the initial reaction of Mill to the pandemic, to the early signs that this was going to be a big problem for the country and the international market?
Well, Mill Steel has been very fortunate. They've made a lot of good decisions over the years, and that's why they're a company that's over 61 years old. uh, like I mentioned earlier when we started, that a lot of the steel mills thought that we were going to go into a great recession all over the world, and so they started shutting down capacity. Well, we can only react to what the demand is for a customer. So if steel demand falls off, our business is going to fall off. So it's the old adage: you can't worry about what you can't control. So if you can't control demand, you really shouldn't worry about anything. But they basically said, I remember we had this company-wide meeting that they all said, there's been a lot of crazy markets in the last 30 years, and they've always come out on the rosy side of it. And sure as hell, one of the equity owners said, when this is all over and said and done, we'll be much better for it, and we have been. We've gained market share. We picked up new customers, obviously through market share, and it's been a there's some very good people making decisions at the top of Mill Steel. That's all I can say is that there's great leadership, and they listen to people that like myself that work for them, and you know they take everything, they put it in a bowl, and they make a decision. They move forward, and it's a well-run company.
All right, well, that sounds like they're very receptive to advice and input from different levels. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, and one thing I've learned over the years is that if you have people that don't listen to people that work for you at different levels, well, then you're a company that's lost at sea, so to speak. And that's what I really like about Mill Steel is they listen. They'll sit there and listen to you, and you have to obviously give them your reasons why you should do something. And if it makes sense to them, they'll make a decision based on it. And it's a comforting feeling knowing that you're just not a pawn, a number in a company.
Can
So
you recall any? Obviously, that sounds like a very solid piece of advice for any aspiring, company leaders and founders out there. Is that input matters, and it goes more to make people feel like they're organic people and
right,
not parts of a machine.
that's right.
Can you recall any instances where input you've had had a direct impact on the direction that the company went during the pandemic?
I don't. Wouldn't say. Yeah, I would back up before the pandemic when I was probably 90 to 100 days into it, and I sat down with my direct report and said, you know, I know you know what you're doing, but you hired me for a reason, and this is what I think we should do. And it was in a time where demand wasn't that great, and there was a lot of extra inventory, and people were fighting for the same piece of the pie. And I said, here's what I would do. If you just listen to me and give me more than a couple months, follow my lead, I'll make things happen for you. And he did. And fortunately, it was all about moving inventory. And sometimes you're not going to make money in the steel business because prices are falling. But as long as you can keep buying steel as a service center, and you're always in that opportunity to buy steel, you'll never go wrong. You might not make money on every sale, and that's just the way the nature of the business. But in the long term, after you look at 12 months or 24 months or 36 months, hopefully you're making 75% of those months you're making money, and sometimes you're going to lose, but that's just the nature of the business.
I feel like that the risk factor is never going to be completely absent from any industry, even one as established as steel, the
Sure.
idea that this, centuries old industry and practice, the material is always going to be in need. That still doesn't save you from missteps.
That's exactly right. And you have to have the constitution for it, and a lot of people don't. And so when you're buying steel as a distributor, now I mentioned our three different business units earlier. Some of those units, like we call repeat automotive or appliance, we have back to back, we have contracts. It's contractual obligations. Now in building products, it's you stock it and they're going to buy it from me as long as you're competitive. And so Uh, I guess you have to have the constitution. You have to be able to move your inventory. The key to this industry is rotating inventory. Don't fall in love with it. Don't try to get the biggest margin and only rotate your inventory once or twice a year. If you can move it 5 or 6 times or rotate it that many times a year, you're far ahead of the game. It's all about inventory rotations, and sometimes you're losing money, and sometimes, and hopefully, more times you're making money. But you always have to be in a position to buy steel when it's on its way down and on its way up. So,
While we're on the subject of easy mistakes to catch and rectify for a company, with your experience, have there been any other major mistakes that you've seen, like other people maybe in your own company or competitors make, that you'd like to comment on?
well, yeah, I've seen mistakes where people misread the market. They think that the market's going to get tight, and so they load up on inventory, and there's a small glimpse where the prices went up for 1 or 2 months, and then it crashes, and so everything they bought they have to unload at a loss. And I haven't seen that with Mill Steel, but I've seen that with other companies, competitors, and it's just sometimes you believe what you want to believe, and but the one thing after you're being in the industry like I have for 30 years is you've been around certain markets. Uh, People come for you more about advice than they do sales. You know what you're talking about, and you're more of a sounding board and an advisory for a lot of your customers.
What kind of a role would you say that just pure, not necessarily intelligence or know-how, or I would just go and just say, what level would you say pure confidence plays in sales for
A
steel?
lot. I mean, if you, I always knew I was going to be in sales and good at it because I had the gift of talking.
The
But
gift of gab.
gift of gab. But honestly, the biggest gift you need in sales is to listen. Uh, but you also have to know what you're talking about. I mean, people can sense when somebody's not being truthful or just guessing, or they're telling you what you want to hear. And when you live through markets that go up and down, and you advise customers what to do and when to buy and when to hold back, they appreciate that, and uh, they'll continue to buy from you. And I've been fortunate, since been being down in Texas for 21 years. I've No matter what company I've worked for, I've been able to sell a lot of the same companies and take them with me because of you know I'm not a BS artist. I tell them the truth. I I read a lot. I try to know what's going on not only in the United States but worldwide. And people appreciate the information. They'll call and say, "What are you seeing?" People call me all the time and say, what do you see in the next 3 months?" It's kind of like I'm asking for advice what to do here.
Look into your
So
crystal ball. Tell me what's
that's
going to
exactly
happen.
right. That's exactly right.
Well, I do hate to immediately follow that up with this question then, but I would love any sorts of insights you have on, you said yourself a lot of people predicted a a very down market, a very like inactive market, a possible like hibernation for the industry, and now we're seeing the exact opposite: massive global demand for steel, a rush to fill orders, a rush to build inventory that's quickly going out the door. With the current state of things, how far out are you looking for what's going to happen next? Like
All right.
months?
So when you talk about making steel, you have domestic lead times, which are really into June. Uh, I sell a product that's at the end of the food chain. It's in flat roll products, you got hot roll, then you got cold roll, and then you got coated products, and I sell galvalume that pretty much goes on roofs and buildings, roofs and walls of buildings and houses. So uh, that galvalume has to start as a hot roll, and then it gets pickled and oiled, and then it gets cold reduced, and then it goes to a metallic coating line. So I'm selling a high-end product, and on top of that, I put paint. So you talk about hot roll that's at its historical highs right now. The average transaction price for a product I'm selling is like $2,400 a ton, which is extremely expensive. And so a truckload is almost 60 grand at this point. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and I kind of lost my train of thought where we were going with this whole question.
Well, I was just saying, like, I know that a lot of the traditions of every industry have been upended fairly
Yeah,
recently. So I know the
yes,
typical range of time that you're looking out for the future is it different? Like, are you looking 5 months down the road, like a year down the road as to what
that's
the
right.
market's going to be doing?
Well, you can only see as far as the lead times, I'll tell you. And so domestically, we're out into June. But if you wanted to buy import from any company out of Asia, you're not getting to see that steel till October. So that's 6 months from now. And so the problem when you buy import is if you're buying steel today and it's not going to get here for 6 months and you can't touch it or sell it or manufacture it, that price might change in 6 months. It might change. It might not change until month 4, and then you might see a price slide. So there's the risk. That's as far as we can see domestically out till June what prices are, and then foreign out till October. So that's as far as we can see.
Are there any sort of average times you're looking for from when you get product in the door to when you want to put it back out on the road? Like,
Well, typically in building products, there's always a layer of inventory that people have the ability to pull from. Well, once this market changed last August and September, what happened was everybody started buying up everything on the ground, and now everything that comes in goes out immediately. Usually, let's just say the average day of inventory is lasts probably anywhere from 60 to 70 days. You know, a coil comes in, it sits in inventory. You're doing the old accounting principles, last in, first out. A coil might average 60 days. Well, now everything that comes in goes right back out because there's nothing on the floor. So the average inventory of a coil is probably 5 or 6 days. That's how crazy things are right now.
I I think that's the only real word you can call it is crazy. And with that in mind, we've seen a lot of companies make good decisions, and seen a lot of companies make bad decisions with regard to the current state of affairs and in a lot of different means. But specifically, I would love to talk a little bit before we end here. Texas, in particular,
Sure.
experienced a crazy weather phenomenon where, for the first time in I would want to say ever, but I don't have that data. You guys got record snowfall. For us, it's a normal day, but for you guys, it was a little bit hectic.
Yep.
Did that factor into how production slowed or how the business ran towards the end of the quarantine?
Yes, that's a good point you made. And actually, it did affect businesses. I mean, you talk about when things couldn't get any worse. Well, it did after that Arctic blast is what we're calling it down here, which I think it was the middle of February or third week of
It was
February.
about
It did.
6 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It definitely. So in Texas, there's no steel mills per se, but you have them down in Mexico. You have coating lines. When I say coating lines, you have Ternium that has a facility in Shreveport, Louisiana. They were affected. Water pressure was affected. When in steel making, you need a lot of water. You need a lot of pressure in water, and because of what happened, steel facilities today, whether it's pre-coat, paint steel, they still don't have the proper water pressure to get things up to where they need it, and it's still affecting production. In fact, uh, material coming from Mexico. Uh, Anything that was probably due the end of February is probably we're probably just now maybe seeing it if we're lucky. So it delayed production even more. So the Arctic blast didn't help; it hurt things. And I mean, the only thing it did do is it slowed down demand for building products because you can't really put up new buildings when it's snowing out and it's 19 degrees down in Texas.
Well, you guys take a licking and keep on ticking, it sounds like. So, that bodes well for everybody if
Yeah.
everybody can keep having that mindset. Bob, we're running up on time. Thank you so much for stopping by and giving us so many insights and stories about what it's been like in your area and your career. We'd love to have you on, because next episode I just want to talk about how we can save the Jets franchise, and I really want to get into that. I
Hey,
get
Kevin,
one
it's been a
random
pleasure.
episode. Yeah.
It's been definitely a pleasure talking to you. And anytime you need to fill some airtime, just give me a call. We can talk about anything for sure.
Oh, we're glad to hear it, Bob. Thank you so much. And to everybody watching, this has been another episode of EOXS's Stories on Steel. Thanks again to Bob for stopping by. And remember, whether galvanized or hot rolled, EOXS will provide a marketplace to take any steel business to the online sector. Thank you and good night.